The great chamber floated in perfect silence. Ambassador Velkoth stood at his station and looked across the massive room. Light came through tall windows and made patterns on the polished floor. He had seen this view for 30 cycles now. Every time he saw it, he felt proud. The Galactic Council had not seen war in over 1,000 cycles. 47 different species sat together in this room. They talked. They argued. They made deals. But they never fought. Not anymore. Those dark days were long gone, buried in history books that nobody read. Velkoth adjusted his formal robes. The fabric was old, passed down through generations of diplomats. His people, the Zentari, had helped build this peace. They were proud of it. Violence was something primitives did. Civilized beings used words, not weapons. The morning session was about to begin. Velkoth checked the agenda on his datapad. Trade disputes between the Moth Collective and the Silicon Brotherhood. Resource allocation in the Beta Quadrant. Standard business permits. Nothing interesting. Nothing important. Just another day of managing an empire that ran itself. High Mediator Shalara entered through the main doors. Her species, the Kuvastians, were known for their patience. She moved slowly, her long robes trailing behind her. She had settled disputes that seemed impossible. She believed that every problem had a peaceful solution. You just had to find the right words. She took her seat at the central podium. The chamber filled with other ambassadors. They chatted quietly. Some reviewed documents. Others made small talk about their families or upcoming festivals. It was comfortable. It was routine. Trader Prince Siktal arrived last, as always. He represented the Merchants Guild, not a single species. Money had no race. He wore expensive jewelry and carried himself with confidence. Velkoth did not like him much. Siktal cared only about profit. But profit kept the galaxy stable.
Happy merchants meant happy worlds. Shalara tapped her staff twice.
The sound echoed through the chamber. Everyone fell silent. The session began. The first matter was simple. Two merchant fleets wanted the same trade route. Both sides presented their cases. Both wanted exclusive rights. The debate lasted 20 minutes. Finally, they agreed to share the route and split the profits. Everyone was satisfied. This was how things worked. This was civilization. The second matter was more delicate. A mining corporation had exceeded its extraction limits on a protected world. The Environmental Council wanted sanctions. The corporation promised to replant and restore. They offered a fine. The council accepted. Problem solved. No violence needed. Just reasonable beings reaching reasonable conclusions. Near the end of the session, Shalara brought up a new topic: humans. Velkoth perked up slightly. He had heard about them. A young species recently discovered on the edge of known space. They had achieved faster than light travel only a few cycles ago. Barely out of their cradle. Shalara displayed an image on the central screen. It showed a blue and green planet. Earth, they called it. Pretty world. Lots of water? The humans themselves looked strange. Only 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin with no natural armor, small frames. They looked weak. A report scrolled across the screen. Humans had made first contact 3 cycles ago. They had been friendly, curious. They asked many questions about the council. They wanted to learn. They wanted to join. They had officially applied for membership 2 cycles ago. The application was under review. Standard procedure for new species. The council needed to study them. Understand their culture. Make sure they could follow the rules. Most species needed decades to prove themselves worthy. Some never made it at all. Siktal spoke up. He had reviewed the human markets. They produced interesting goods. Primitive but creative. Their art was unusual. Their food was diverse. They could be profitable trading partners eventually. But they needed guidance. They needed to learn patience. Velkoth agreed. Humans showed promise. They were intelligent enough to develop space travel on their own. That was good. But they were also emotional. Their history was full of wars. They fought each other constantly. Even now, with one unified government, they still had disputes. They needed to evolve past violence. They needed to become civilized. Shalara suggested placing Earth under developmental observation. The council would watch them from a distance, guide them gently, teach them proper behavior. In time, perhaps in 50 or 100 cycles, they might be ready to join. The council voted. The motion passed. Humans would wait. The session ended. Ambassadors filed out slowly. They discussed dinner plans. Some had theater tickets. Others wanted to visit the station's famous gardens. Velkoth walked with Shalara toward the exit. She seemed thoughtful. He asked what troubled her. She said nothing troubled her. She was simply thinking about the humans. They reminded her of the Kuvastians from long ago. Her own people had been warriors once, fierce and proud, but they learned better. They put down their weapons. They chose words over war. Velkoth nodded. Every species went through this phase. It was natural. Evolution favored aggression in primitive environments. But in space, surrounded by thousands of other species, violence was suicide. The humans would learn. They had to. What neither of them knew was that something was already wrong. Far from the Council's seat of power, on the very edge of mapped space, a human colony had disappeared from contact. The colony was called New Horizon. 30,000 people lived there. Men, women, and children. New Horizon had been silent for 8 months. Earth sent messages. No replies came back. They sent more messages. Still nothing. But Earth was new to space. They did not have many ships. They could not send help immediately. They waited. They hoped their people were safe. The Council did not know about New Horizon. It was not on their maps yet. Too far out. Too unimportant. Just another frontier world that nobody cared about. The galaxy was huge. The Council could not watch everything. But someone else knew about New Horizon. Kresh Corporation operated mining facilities in that region. They were a legitimate business, licensed by the Council. They followed most of the rules. Most of them, but not all. Out on the frontier, far from oversight, rules became suggestions. And suggestions were easy to ignore. Kresh needed workers for their radioactive mineral extraction. The work was dangerous. Very dangerous. Most species refused to do it. The pay was never good enough. The risk was too high. Legal workers were expensive. Kresh wanted to save money. When they found New Horizon, they saw opportunity. Humans were new. Humans were alone. Nobody would miss them. Nobody would notice. Kresh ships surrounded the colony in the night. They landed without permission. They brought weapons. The colonists had no defense. No military. They were farmers and scientists and families. Kresh took them all. Every single person. They took the children too. Young hands could reach into small spaces. Young hands were useful. They put everyone in chains. They put them in the mines. They worked them without rest, without proper protection. The radiation made them sick. Many died. Kresh did not care. There were always more workers. Back on Zenith Prime Station, Velkoth enjoyed his evening. He ate dinner at his favorite restaurant. The food was excellent. The company was pleasant. He went home to his comfortable quarters. He slept well. He dreamed of nothing. Tomorrow would be another peaceful day in a peaceful galaxy. A galaxy that had forgotten what monsters looked like. A galaxy that was about to remember. Captain Sarah Chen did not like the silence. Her ship, the Perseverance, was a merchant vessel. Small, old, but reliable. She had been running cargo routes for 12 years. She knew when something felt wrong. And this felt wrong. Her crew had picked up a strange signal 3 days ago. Faint, irregular, like someone trying to call for help, but failing. The signal came from New Horizon. Sarah knew that name. Every human in space knew that name. The colony had been silent for 8 months. Earth thought they might be dead. Equipment failure. Meteor strike, disease, nobody knew, but Sarah had found them, or at least she had found something. The Perseverance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Horizon system. Sarah stared at the scanner readings. Her hands felt cold. Ships, dozens of ships, big ones. Mining vessels with corporate markings. Kresh Corporation. Sarah knew them. Everyone in the merchant trade knew them. They had a reputation. Not a good one. They cut corners. They ignored safety rules. They cared about profit and nothing else. Sarah moved closer carefully. She kept her engines low. She did not want to be noticed. She scanned the planet's surface. What she saw made her stomach turn. The colony was still there. Buildings intact. But something was terribly wrong. Mining equipment everywhere. Huge excavators. Processing plants. None of that had been there before. New Horizon was a farming colony, not a mining operation. She sent down a small probe. It was risky. If Kresh detected it, they would investigate. But she needed to know. The probe landed near the main settlement. Its cameras showed the truth: people, human people, wearing rags, covered in dirt, thin, so terribly thin. They carried rocks. They moved slowly. Guards watched them, alien guards with weapons. Sarah watched the video feed. She felt sick. These were not workers. These were slaves. The guards hit people who moved too slowly. The colonists had chains on their wrists. Some of them fell down. The guards dragged them back up, made them keep working. Then the probe moved to the mines. The entrance glowed with strange light, radiation. Sarah's scanner went crazy. The levels were lethal. Nobody should be in there without protection. But people were going in, coming out, going back in, over and over. She saw children, small bodies carrying small loads, children in radioactive mines. Sarah pulled back the probe before it was detected. She reviewed the footage again. And again. She counted the people she could see. Maybe 3,000 on the surface. But the colony had 30,000 people. Where were the others? The answer came when the probe's sensors analyzed a large mound near the mines. Graves. Mass graves. Sarah's first officer, Marcus Webb, looked at the data. His face went white. He said they needed to leave. Right now. Call Earth. Let someone else handle this. They were just a cargo ship. 5 crew members. No weapons. They could not fight Kresh. Sarah agreed about leaving, but not about staying quiet. She started recording everything: video, sensor logs, radiation readings, location data, everything. She compressed it all into an emergency transmission packet. Then she aimed her communications array directly at Earth and sent it all. Maximum power. The transmission would take time to arrive. But it would arrive. The transmission was noticed. A Kresh patrol ship detected the signal. It changed course. Started pursuing. Sarah ran. The Perseverance was old, but she was fast. Sarah pushed the engines hard. They made it to the edge of the system and jumped to faster than light. Safe. For now. 4 days later, the transmission reached Earth. It arrived in the middle of the night. The communications officer who received it did not sleep after that. He sent it straight to the government. Emergency protocols activated. The president was woken up. The entire cabinet assembled. They watched the footage in silence. Some people cried. Others looked angry. One ambassador vomited in a waste bin. These were not just colonists. These were their people, citizens, families, children enslaved, worked to death, buried in mass graves. The president called an emergency session of the entire United Earth government. Every nation sent representatives. Every nation saw the footage. The debate was short. Everyone agreed. They would take this to the Galactic Council. Demand justice. Demand the return of their people. The council had rules about this, treaties. They would make this right. Ambassador Marcus Stone was chosen to present the case. He was young for an ambassador, only 45 years old. But he was smart, calm, he spoke well. He was told to stay professional. Be respectful. The council would help. They had to help. This was what the council existed for. Stone arrived at Zenith Prime Station 5 days later. He requested an emergency session. The council agreed. They were curious. Humans rarely asked for emergency sessions. It must be important. They cleared the schedule. Stone was given 30 minutes to present his case. The chamber filled quickly. Ambassadors wanted to see what the fuss was about. Velkoth was there. So was Shalara. And Siktal. They all took their seats. Stone walked to the central platform. He looked calm, but his hands shook slightly as he activated the display. The footage played on every screen in the chamber. The colonists in chains, the guards with weapons, the children in the mines, the radiation readings, the mass graves. Stone let it play for 10 minutes. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. When it ended, silence filled the room. Stone spoke clearly. He stated the facts. Kresh Corporation had illegally enslaved 30,000 human citizens. Thousands were already dead. The rest were dying. He presented the evidence, sensor logs, location data. Everything was documented. Everything was verified. He asked the council for immediate action. Rescue the colonists. Arrest the Kresh leadership. Bring them to justice. The council reviewed the evidence. They confirmed it was real. They called Kresh representatives. The representatives did not deny anything. They said it was a business matter. The humans had no claim to that region, no registered rights. Kresh had found an available workforce. Standard frontier practice. Not ideal, but not technically illegal. Stone could not believe what he heard. Business matter? Available workforce? These were people. Human beings. Citizens of Earth, families. How was this not illegal? The Council explained their laws. The frontier had different rules. Looser rules. Resources were contested. The humans had not properly registered their colony. Paperwork mattered. Treaties mattered. Velkoth suggested a fine. Kresh would pay for improper mining practices. They would pay for the improper treatment of workers. A substantial fine. 10 million galactic credits. Also economic sanctions. Kresh would be banned from council contracts for 10 cycles. That would teach them to follow the rules. Stone stared at him. 10 million credits. 10 cycles. His people were dying. Children were dying. The answer was money? He asked about the colonists. When would they be freed? Velkoth looked uncomfortable. The sanctions would encourage Kresh to release them. Eventually. Probably within the 10-cycle period. 10 cycles was 10 years. Stone said that was not acceptable. His people would be dead in 10 years. They were dying now. He demanded immediate action. Immediate rescue. Shalara spoke gently. She understood his emotions. But the council had procedures. Due process. They could not simply attack a licensed corporation. That would set a dangerous precedent. Shiktal added that Kresh employed millions across hundreds of worlds. If the council shut them down, those people would lose their jobs. The economic disruption would be massive. They had to think about the bigger picture. One colony versus the stability of the entire system. Stone felt his control slipping. He had been told to stay calm. Stay professional. But calm was not working. Professional was not working. He tried one more time. He begged, please, save his people. They were dying. Children were dying. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequence, please help. The council voted. The fine was approved. The sanctions were approved. The immediate rescue was denied. Velkoth said humans needed to understand how galactic society worked. Everything had process. Everything had procedure. In time, Stone would see that this was the best solution. The civilized solution. Stone stood alone on the platform. He looked at the faces around him. Comfortable faces. Safe faces. These people had forgotten what fear felt like. What rage felt like. What desperation felt like. He spoke one last time. His voice was quiet. Cold. If you will not free our people, we will. The council members smiled. Velkoth actually laughed. They dismissed him. Another emotional youngster. He would learn. They always did. Stone left the chamber. He did not look back. He had a call to make. Earth went dark. Every communication channel closed. Every diplomatic link severed. The human embassy on Zenith Prime Station shut its doors. Staff left without explanation. Ships stopped coming. Trade stopped. Everything stopped. It was like humanity had simply vanished. The council found this behavior strange. Velkoth tried to contact Ambassador Stone, no response. He tried to reach Earth directly. No response. Communications officers reported that all human frequencies were dead. Not jammed, not blocked, just silent. Like nobody was home. Shalara suggested that humans were processing their emotions. They were upset about the council's decision. They needed time to accept reality. It was understandable. Young species often had trouble with disappointment. They would calm down. They always did. Give them space. Give them time. Shiktal was more concerned. He had business contacts in human space. They had all gone quiet too. Orders were canceled. Contracts were terminated. Money was being moved. Resources were being redirected. Something was happening, but what? The Council's intelligence services tried to penetrate the information blackout. They sent spy probes toward Earth. The probes never reported back. They sent undercover agents. The agents could not get visas. Human space had closed its borders. Nobody in, nobody out. It was unprecedented. Species did not just isolate themselves like this. Not in modern times, days became weeks. Weeks became a month. Then 40 days. 40 days of complete silence. The Council began to worry. Not about humans. About instability. What if this isolation caused economic problems? What if human colonies started fighting among themselves? That could spill over into council space. Create refugee situations. They needed to restore contact. On the 41st day, a ship appeared at Zenith Prime Station. A human ship, small diplomatic class. It requested docking permission. The request was immediately granted. Finally, someone to explain what was happening. The council called an emergency session. They would clear this misunderstanding, get things back to normal. Ambassador Stone entered the chamber. He was not alone. A woman walked beside him. She wore a military uniform, dark blue with gold insignia, rows of medals on her chest. She carried herself like a soldier, straight back, cold eyes. She did not look diplomatic at all. Velkoth welcomed them warmly. He was glad to see humans were ready to talk again. He understood emotions ran high. But surely they had calmed down now. Surely they were ready to accept the council's wisdom. Stone said nothing. He walked to the central platform. The woman stayed close beside him. Stone placed a single document on the display podium. It was old-fashioned, paper, not a digital file, real physical paper. He did not smile, did not explain. He simply activated the document scanner. The text appeared on every screen in the chamber. Large, clear, impossible to ignore. The title read, Formal Declaration of War. The council sat in stunned silence. War? The word felt foreign, ancient. It took a moment for the meaning to register. When it did, several ambassadors laughed. Velkoth actually chuckled out loud. This had to be a joke. Humans could not be serious. Stone began to read. His voice was flat, professional. The United Earth government hereby declares a state of war exists between humanity and Kresh Corporation. Furthermore, any entity or government that provides material support, military aid, or shelter to Kresh Corporation will be considered hostile combatants. This declaration is effective immediately. The laughter stopped. This was not a joke. Stone continued. Our demands are simple. Immediate release of all human colonists currently held by Kresh Corporation. Surrender of all Kresh personnel involved in the enslavement, torture, and murder of human citizens. Said personnel will be tried under human law for crimes against sentient beings. Full reparations for damages. If these demands are not met within 24 hours, military action will commence. Velkoth found his voice. This was absurd. Humans could not declare war. The council had not authorized it. War required council approval. That was the law. That was how civilization worked. Stone looked at him. We are not asking for permission. We are informing you of our decision. You had 40 days to act. You chose not to. We gave you time. You gave us war. Shalara tried diplomacy. She said war was unnecessary. The council would review the case again. Perhaps they could expedite the sanctions. Add more penalties. Surely there was a peaceful solution. Stone shook his head. We tried peace. We brought you evidence. We begged for help. You offered money and time. Our people do not have time. They are dying now, today, this moment. We will not debate anymore. The woman beside Stone stepped forward. She introduced herself. Admiral Jessica Torres, commander of the United Earth Defense Fleet. She addressed the council directly. We understand you have not fought a war in 1,000 cycles. We understand you think we are primitive, weak. You are correct that we are new to space. But we are not new to war. We have fought wars for our entire history. We are very good at it. Shiktal spoke up. He tried to sound reasonable. He said humans were outnumbered, outgunned. Kresh Corporation had a defense fleet, 200 ships, modern vessels with advanced weapons. 3 council member species had pledged support. Another 100 ships. Humans had what? A dozen outdated vessels? This was suicide. They would be destroyed. Admiral Torres smiled. It was not a kind smile. She said that was a fair assessment. The council had better weapons, better technology, but humans had something the council did not. Humans had rage. Humans remembered how to fight. Humans remembered that sometimes violence was not a failure of diplomacy. Sometimes violence was the only language monsters understood. Velkoth had heard enough. He called for order. This was a formal council chamber, not a theater for threats. He demanded humans withdraw their declaration, accept the council's judgment, return to proper channels, or face consequences. The council could sanction Earth, cut them off completely. Humans would not survive isolation. They needed council trade. Council resources. Council protection, Stone replied softly. We spent 40 days preparing to survive without you. We do not need your protection. We do not want your protection. You had one job. Protect the innocent. Free the enslaved. Punish the guilty. You failed. So we will do it ourselves. And if you stand in our way, we will go through you too. The chamber erupted. Ambassadors shouted. Some called for security. Others called for sanctions. A few called for military intervention. Teach these primitives a lesson. Show them what happened to species who defied the council. The noise was overwhelming. Stone and Admiral Torres stood quietly at the center of it all. They did not argue, did not respond. They simply waited. Eventually the shouting stopped. Shalara regained control. She looked tired, sad. She asked Stone if he truly understood what he was doing. War meant death. Lots of death. Human death. Was he prepared for that? Were his people prepared for that? Stone nodded. Yes, we have counted the cost. We have accepted it. Some things are worth dying for. Our people learned that long ago. Perhaps you have forgotten. Velkoth called for a formal vote. The council would refuse the human demands. They would support Kresh Corporation's right to defend itself. They would mobilize a joint defense fleet. 3 species immediately pledged ships. Together with Kresh's own forces, they would assemble 300 vessels, more than enough to crush any human resistance. The vote passed. The council had spoken. Stone picked up his paper document. He folded it carefully. He placed it in his jacket pocket. He looked at Velkoth, at Shalara, at Shiktal, at all the comfortable faces in their comfortable chamber. He spoke one final time. We gave you 40 days. You gave us nothing. Now we give you 24 hours. Pray that is enough time, because when the clock runs out, there will be no more talking, no more diplomacy, no more civilization. There will only be war. Stone and Admiral Torres walked out. The doors closed behind them. The chamber remained silent for a long time. Nobody knew what to say. They had lived in peace for 1,000 cycles. War was something that happened to other people, ancient people. Primitive people. Not them, never them. Velkoth looked at the empty platform where Stone had stood. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had not felt in decades. He felt afraid. 24 hours passed. The deadline came. Kresh Corporation refused to release the colonists. They called the human demands unreasonable, illegal. They demanded council protection. The council agreed. The Joint Defense Fleet assembled at New Horizon. 200 Kresh vessels, 100 council ships, 300 total. They were ready. The fleet commander was Admiral Tekmor, a Zentari officer with 40 cycles of experience. He had never fought a real battle. Nobody had, but he had trained, studied history. He knew the tactics. His fleet was strong, well-armed, professional. The humans had no chance. This would be over quickly. Tekmor positioned his fleet in orbit around New Horizon, standard defensive formation, larger ships in front, smaller ships behind, sensors on maximum. He expected the humans to send their pathetic dozen ships. He would destroy them, capture the survivors, make an example. Then everyone could go home. The sensors detected something, ships dropping out of faster than light. Lots of ships, too many ships. Tekmor stared at the display. 50 contacts, 70, 100, 150, 200. The numbers kept climbing. When they stopped, the display showed 423 vessels. Tekmor did not understand. Humans did not have 400 ships. Intelligence said they had maybe 20. All old, all weak. He scanned the fleet more carefully. His confusion grew. These were not warships. He saw cargo haulers, colony transports, science vessels, mining ships, even a few luxury liners. What kind of fleet was this? Admiral Torres broadcast on all frequencies. Her voice was cold. You were given a choice. You chose war, so be it. Tekmor tried to respond. He tried to establish communication. Offer terms. But Torres was done talking. The human fleet charged. It was not graceful, not tactical, not civilized. The humans came straight at them. Full speed. No formations. No strategy. Just raw aggression. Tekmor ordered his fleet to open fire. The council ships had better weapons, better range. They hit the human ships easily. Vessels exploded. Hulls shattered. Bodies were thrown into space, but the humans did not stop. They did not retreat. They did not even slow down. They kept coming. Thekmor destroyed 10 ships, 20, 30, it did not matter. For every ship that died, 3 more took its place. And then he understood. These humans were not trying to win cleanly. They were willing to die. The first human ship reached the Council line. It was a cargo hauler, modified. It rammed a Kresh destroyer at full speed. Both ships exploded. The blast took out 2 nearby vessels. Thekmor could not believe it. Nobody used ramming tactics. Not in modern warfare. It was wasteful, inefficient, insane, but insane was working. More human ships crashed into the Council fleet. Some carried explosives. Some carried nothing but mass and momentum. They hit frigates. They hit cruisers. They hit anything they could reach. The explosions created chaos. Sensors went wild. Communications broke down. Ships collided with each other trying to evade. Then the real nightmare began. Human ships that got through the initial defensive line opened fire, but they were not using standard weapons. They used railguns, primitive kinetic weapons that fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. The slugs punched through shields, through armor, through entire ships, and the humans had mounted them on everything. Every single vessel was armed. Worse than the railguns were the missiles, small, fast. Dozens launched from each ship. Thekmor's sensors identified them. Nuclear warheads. His blood ran cold. Nuclear weapons had been banned by the Council for 800 cycles. Too destructive, too barbaric, too permanent. But humans did not care about Council laws. They fired freely. The first nuclear detonation vaporized a Kresh cruiser. The blast wave crippled 6 more ships. Radiation alarms screamed across the fleet. Crews panicked. They had no training for this. No protocols. This was supposed to be a police action, not a real war. Not this kind of war. Thekmor tried to reform his lines, tried to establish order, but the humans were everywhere. They did not follow patterns, did not use formations. They swarmed, like insects, like predators. They found weak points and exploited them. They isolated ships and destroyed them. They gave no quarter, took no prisoners. 3 hours into the battle, human boarding pods started hitting Council ships. Magnetic clamps, cutting torches. Marines in combat armor poured through breached hulls. Thekmor received reports. The humans were not taking prisoners. They were executing crews, shooting everyone they found. This was not warfare. This was extermination. Thekmor called for retreat. His fleet was falling apart. Half his ships were gone. The rest were damaged. Morale had collapsed. Captains were abandoning their posts. Entire crews were evacuating in escape pods. He gave the order. Full retreat. Every ship for themselves, get out. Get out now. But the humans did not let them go. They pursued. They hunted down every fleeing vessel. They targeted engines, disabled ships, then boarded them. The massacres continued. Thekmor's own flagship was hit. Engines failed. Marines breached the hull. He heard gunfire, screaming. He sealed himself in the command center, sent one final transmission to the Council. Tell them we were wrong. Tell them humans are not weak. Tell them to run. The battle ended after 6 hours. The Council fleet was destroyed. All 300 ships gone. Scattered debris orbited New Horizon. Fires burned in the wreckage. Human losses were heavy. 137 ships destroyed. Thousands of crew members dead. But they had won. The enemy was eliminated. Admiral Torres ordered the landing operation. 200 Marine transports descended to the planet's surface. They hit every Kresh facility simultaneously. The fighting was brutal. Close quarters. Room to room. Humans had trained for this. Prepared for this. The Kresh guards were security personnel. Not soldiers. They broke quickly. The colonists were found. 12,000 still alive, sick, starving, but alive. The Marines carried them out. Gave them water, food, medical care. Some colonists could not walk. Some could not speak. All of them cried. The Marines cried too. They had come in time. Barely. But they had come. The Kresh leadership was captured. Facility managers, corporate executives, guards who had beaten colonists. All of them. They were zip-tied and loaded onto transports. They begged for mercy, for Council protection, for civilized treatment. The Marines said nothing. They just loaded them up like cargo. Admiral Torres stood on the surface of New Horizon. She watched the rescue operation, watched colonists being carried to medical ships, watched Kresh prisoners being marched to holding cells. She felt no satisfaction, no joy, just exhaustion. And anger. So much anger. This should never have happened. The council should have prevented this. But they chose bureaucracy over justice, procedure over people. News of the battle reached the council within hours. Velkoth received the report in his office. He read it 3 times. He could not believe it. 300 ships destroyed, thousands dead. The humans had won. Humans. The weak species with old ships and no experience. They had crushed the council fleet. How? Shalara called an emergency session. The chamber filled quickly. Everyone had heard rumors. Nobody knew the full truth. When the official report was read aloud, silence fell. Then panic. Ambassadors shouted over each other. Some demanded military action, full mobilization, destroy Earth before humans could attack again. Others called for negotiation, peace, anything to avoid more fighting. Shiktal was the only one who understood. He had spent 40 days wondering what humans were doing. Now he knew. They were preparing. Every merchant ship, every cargo hauler, every civilian vessel, all converted to war, all armed, all crewed by people who were willing to die. Humans had not sent their military. They had sent their entire civilization. Intelligence reports started flooding in. Earth had fully mobilized. 15% of their entire economy now dedicated to war production. Shipyards were building actual warships, not converted civilian vessels. Real military craft. Weapons factories were running day and night. Humans were recruiting soldiers, training them, preparing for a long conflict, and they were not slowing down. They were accelerating. The storm had broken, and the council was standing in its path. 7 days after the Battle of New Horizon, Ambassador Stone returned to Zenith Prime Station. Admiral Torres came with him again. This time nobody laughed when they entered the chamber. Nobody smiled. The ambassadors watched them walk to the central platform in complete silence. Fear had replaced comfort. Stone placed another document on the podium. Not a declaration this time, a treaty. Terms for ending hostilities. The council had no choice but to listen. They had run war simulations. Calculated costs. Every scenario ended in disaster. Humans could not be beaten. Not easily. Maybe not at all. They fought like nothing the galaxy had seen in centuries. They fought without mercy, without hesitation, without fear. The terms were simple. First, all Kresh Corporation personnel involved in the enslavement would be turned over to human custody. No exceptions. No negotiations. They would be tried under human law. Executed if found guilty. The council did not have the death penalty, had not used it in 800 cycles. But humans did not care about council customs. This was non-negotiable. Second, Kresh Corporation would be dissolved, all assets seized, redistributed as reparations to the surviving colonists and the families of the dead. The company would cease to exist. Any attempt to reform under a different name would be considered an act of war. Again, non-negotiable. Third, the 3 species who had supported Kresh would issue public apologies. Not private diplomatic notes, public broadcasts across the entire galaxy. They would also pay reparations. The amount was substantial, painful, but not crippling. Humans wanted justice, not revenge. There was a difference. Fourth, and most controversial, humanity demanded full council membership. Not provisional membership, not observer status, full voting rights, full veto power, equal standing with every other species. And humanity wanted a seat on the Security Council, permanent, with authority to intervene in future disputes. Velkoth objected immediately. This was outrageous. Council membership took decades to earn, sometimes centuries. Humans had been in space for barely 10 cycles. They had not proven themselves worthy. They had proven themselves violent. That was all. Violence should not be rewarded with power. Stone listened patiently. When Velkoth finished, Stone responded. Violence was not being rewarded. Capability was being recognized. Humans had shown they could project power across the galaxy. They could wage war. They could win. That made them a major player whether the council liked it or not. The only question was whether humans would be inside the council or outside it. Inside meant cooperation. Outside meant conflict. Admiral Torres added context. Earth's military production was still increasing. They were building real warships now. Modern designs, learning from captured Council technology. In one cycle, maybe two, humans would have a fleet to rival any Council species. In 5 cycles, they would be the dominant military power in the galaxy. The Council could accept that reality now or learn it the hard way later. Shalara asked what would happen if the Council refused these terms. Stone did not hesitate. War would continue. Humans would target any species who sheltered Kresh personnel. They would blockade trade routes, raid supply lines, make commerce impossible. Eventually, the economic damage would force the Council to surrender anyway. But many more would die first. The choice was between peace now with dignity or peace later with humiliation. The Council debated for 3 days. Behind closed doors, every scenario was analyzed, every option explored. The conclusion was unavoidable. Humans held all the leverage. They had shown they could fight. Would fight, were willing to die fighting. The Council had forgotten how to do those things. Their weapons were better, but their will was weaker. Superior technology meant nothing without the courage to use it. Shiktal made the final argument. He appealed to practical concerns. War was bad for business, very bad. Trade had already collapsed in 6 sectors. Insurance rates had tripled. Merchant fleets refused to operate near human space. The longer this continued, the worse it would get. Accept the terms. Restore stability. Make money again. Sometimes survival meant swallowing pride. The vote was held. The terms passed. Not unanimously, but by enough. The Kresh personnel would be turned over. Public apologies would be issued. Reparations would be paid, and humanity would receive full Council membership. The treaty was signed. The war was over, officially. 2 months later, the executions took place. Not on Zenith Prime, not in civilized space. In human space, on a station orbiting Earth, public viewing was allowed. Millions watched. The Kresh executives were tried. Found guilty, sentenced to death. The method was simple: airlock, quick, clean, no ceremony. No speeches, just justice. The galaxy was horrified. The death penalty was barbaric, uncivilized, wrong. But humans did not apologize. They said these people had enslaved children, worked them to death in radioactive mines, buried thousands in mass graves. Death was merciful compared to what they deserved. The message was clear: touch human citizens and die. No exceptions, no mercy, no forgiveness. New Horizon was rebuilt, not as a mining colony, as a memorial. The mass graves were preserved, marked with simple stones, names carved for every victim. A museum was built. It displayed footage from the rescue, showed the conditions, the suffering, the cost. Every human child visited on school trips. Nobody would forget. Nobody could forget. Admiral Torres was promoted. She became the first human to serve on the Council's Joint Defense Coordination Committee. Other species were uncomfortable with this. They had seen what she could do, what humans could do, but that was exactly why she was there. Humans now had a voice in military decisions, a veto on conflicts. They would ensure this never happened again. To anyone, Ambassador Stone took his seat in the Council chamber. The human delegation was small, just 5 people, but they sat in a position of prominence, equal to the oldest Council races. Some ambassadors refused to acknowledge them. Others tried to build bridges. Stone was professional with everyone, friendly to those who deserved it, cold to those who did not. He never forgot who had laughed at him, who had dismissed human suffering. He kept a list. The first major vote with human participation was about frontier regulations. New rules for corporate operations, better oversight, mandatory inspections, real penalties for violations. The vote passed unanimously. Nobody wanted to be the next Kresh. Nobody wanted humans looking at them the way humans looked at Kresh. Fear was a powerful motivator. Other species began reassessing their own defense capabilities. The Kovastians restarted their military academies, training soldiers for the first time in 400 cycles. The Zentari expanded their fleet, added weapons research. Even peaceful species started building defenses. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Peace maintained by weakness was just waiting to be prey. True peace required strength. Velkoth and Stone eventually developed a working relationship. Not friendship, but respect. Velkoth admitted privately that the Council had failed. They had become comfortable, complacent. They forgot that evil still existed. They thought civilization had conquered it, but evil never disappeared. It just waited for people to look away. Humans had reminded them to keep watching. Shilara reflected on the change. The quiet millennium was over. The galaxy would never return to that innocent time, but perhaps that was good. Perhaps they had needed this. A wake-up call. A reminder that peace was not passive. Peace was active. It required vigilance, required strength, required the willingness to fight for what was right, even when fighting was hard. 5 cycles after New Horizon, a small species on the frontier was being exploited by a mining consortium. Their complaints to the council were being ignored. Standard procedure, forms, committees, time. But then something different happened. The human delegation intervened. They did not wait for committees. They sent a fleet. The consortium saw the ships coming and immediately withdrew. Released the exploited workers. Paid compensation. Nobody wanted to fight humans. Other species began to understand. Humans were not conquerors. They did not seek empire. They sought justice, fair treatment, protection for the weak. They became the galaxy's conscience. The voice that said no when others said maybe. The force that acted when others debated. It was not always comfortable, but it was effective. Stone stood in the council chamber 10 cycles after his first visit. The room looked the same. The faces were mostly the same, but everything had changed. The chamber was no longer a museum of dead ideals. It was alive, active, engaged. Species debated with passion, fought with words. But they fought for real things. Real justice. Real protection. A young ambassador approached him after one session, asked how humans had changed the galaxy so quickly. Stone thought about it, then answered simply, "We did not change you. We reminded you. You had forgotten what you once knew. That peace without justice is just slow tyranny. That civilization without courage is just organized cowardice. That sometimes the right thing requires sacrifice, pain, even violence. We did not teach you anything new. We just made you remember what you had forgotten." The young ambassador asked if Stone regretted the war. The deaths. The destruction. Stone looked out the tall windows at the stars. He thought about the 12,000 survivors. About the children who would grow up free instead of dying in chains.